I used to believe that love could be earned, like a medal handed out after years of obedience and sacrifice. From the moment I was old enough to understand words like responsibility and expectations, my family made sure I knew what my role was. To be perfect. Perfect grades. Perfect manners. Perfect silence when my opinions didn't match theirs. I tried. God knows I tried. I swallowed every word that might sound rebellious. I smiled when I wanted to cry. I carried the weight of their dreams, even when it crushed mine. But love never came. Not the kind I needed. They praised me when I succeeded, but their eyes never softened with pride. Their voices never said, "We love you just the way you are." Instead, I became their puppet. And for a long time I convinced myself that was enough. Until the day came when everything cracked. It happened on a Sunday afternoon. We were all gathered in the living room, my parents, my brother, and me. The air was heavy with silence, the kind that comes before judgment. My father looked at me with that familiar mix of disappointment and calculation. "You should apply for law school," he said. "It's respectable. Not like the nonsense you waste time on." By nonsense, he meant my writing. The journals I kept hidden under my bed. The stories that spilled out of me when no one was watching. The only place I felt like myself. I nodded because that was what I always did. But something in me twisted that day. Maybe it was the way my brother smirked at my silence, or the way my mother didn't defend me. Maybe it was the sudden realization that my entire existence was a glass mask, and the cracks were beginning to show. When I excused myself and went upstairs, I closed the door and pressed my back against it. For the first time I thought, what if I stop trying to be what they want? The thought terrified me. But it also lit a spark inside my chest. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the faint ticking of the clock in the hallway. Every second sounded louder, like a drum beating in my chest. I thought about my life, every year spent chasing approval that never came. Every smile I forced, every tear I hid. Something inside me shifted. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, almost invisible. But it was real. The next morning, I didn't argue with my father when he reminded me about law school. I didn't defend my writing either. Instead, I simply nodded, just as I always did. But later, when everyone left the house, I sat at my desk and opened my notebook. My hands shook as I wrote, not about dreams or stories this time, but about them. The way they made me feel invisible. The way love in my family was a transaction, not a gift. Page after page poured out. It felt like bleeding, but in the most freeing way. It was my rebellion, silent, hidden, but alive. And though they didn't know it, something dangerous had begun. I was learning what it meant to have a voice. I should have known my secrets were never safe in that house. Privacy was a luxury I was never granted. One evening, I came home to find my notebook lying open on the dining table. Its pages, my words, my pain, my truth were exposed like a wound. My brother leaned back in his chair, smirking, while my parents stood frozen, reading. My father's voice was ice. "So this is what you think of us?" My mother's lips pressed into a thin line, like she had swallowed her shame whole. "You're ungrateful," she whispered. "After everything we've done for you." I tried to explain. Tried to say that writing was the only way I survived, that it wasn't meant for their eyes. But they didn't hear me. They didn't want to. That night, my father tore the notebook in half and threw it into the trash. "You will forget this nonsense," he said. "You will focus on what matters." I went to my room, my hands trembling, my throat burning with words I couldn't speak. For the first time I felt not just unloved but betrayed. They hadn't just rejected my dream. They had rejected me. After that night, I learned the art of disappearing. Not physically. I was still there at every family dinner, every forced smile, every lecture about responsibility. But inside, I began to retreat into a world where they couldn't reach me. I went to school, got the grades they expected, played the role they scripted. But when I came home, I became a ghost in my own house. I moved quietly, spoke little, and gave them only the version of me they demanded. The real me, the one who still wrote, still dreamed, lived in shadows. I hid scraps of paper in the lining of my backpack, in the sleeves of old jackets, even inside the covers of textbooks. They had destroyed one notebook, but they couldn't destroy all of me. Yet the silence came at a cost. Every day I pretended, a piece of me faded. And in their eyes, my obedience was proof of love. But I knew the truth. It wasn't love. It was control. And though I didn't realize it yet, control never lasts forever. The breaking point came years later, almost quietly, like a glass slipping from a hand. I had just received my acceptance letter. Not for law school, but for a writing program I'd applied to in secret. For the first time in my life, the future felt like it belonged to me. My heart raced with both fear and exhilaration as I held that letter close, like a treasure no one could steal. But secrets never survived long in my family. My mother found the envelope tucked between my clothes. At dinner, she laid it on the table as if it were evidence of a crime. "You lied to us," she said, her voice trembling with anger. "After everything we sacrificed, this is how you repay us." My father didn't speak right away. He just stared at me, his silence heavier than any words. Finally, he said, "If you go down this path, you are no longer part of this family." The room spun. My chest tightened. 4 years I had lived for their approval, built my entire identity on the shaky foundation of their love. And now, with a single sentence, they threatened to erase me. But somewhere deep inside, I felt it, the quiet flame that had been waiting all along. For the first time, I thought, maybe being erased by them is the only way I can exist as myself. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat by the window, the acceptance letter in my lap, listening to the quiet hum of the street outside. I thought about everything I had done for them, every sacrifice, every dream I had buried to make room for theirs. I thought about the little girl I once was, the one who only wanted to hear, "We love you no matter what." That girl never got what she needed. And suddenly I realized something I had been too afraid to admit. I could spend my entire life trying, and it would never be enough. Their love wasn't missing because I failed, it was missing because they chose not to give it. By dawn I had made my decision. I packed a small bag. Clothes, money I had secretly saved, and my hidden pages of writing. I folded the acceptance letter carefully and placed it on top. When I left the house, the sun was just rising, painting the sky with colors my family would never see in me. For the first time, I walked out the door not as their daughter but as myself. It was terrifying. It was heartbreaking. But it was freedom. Leaving wasn't the hard part. Staying gone was. The first weeks were a blur of small apartments, cheap meals, and endless self-doubt. I worked whatever jobs I could find, waitressing, cleaning, tutoring, just to survive. Every night I collapsed into bed exhausted, my body aching, my hands smelling of grease or cleaning supplies. And yet, I was alive in a way I had never been before. I could write without fear of someone tearing my pages apart. I could breathe without tiptoeing around expectations. I could wake up and decide what I wanted for the day, even if it was as small as buying myself flowers no one else would ever see. But freedom came with a price. There were nights I lay awake crying, wondering if I had made a mistake. There were mornings when the silence of not belonging anywhere felt heavier than chains. Still, I didn't go back. Because every time I thought about returning, I remembered the look in my father's eyes when he said I wasn't part of the family. And I remembered how, for the first time, it didn't break me, it freed me. Time has a way of softening even the sharpest wounds. Months passed, then years, and slowly the pieces of me began to fit together again. But this time they formed my shape, not the one my family had carved for me. I poured myself into writing. Every story I created was a thread pulling me further from their grip, weaving a world where I finally belonged. My words carried both my scars and my hope, and for the first time people listened. Strangers, people who owed me nothing, read my work and said, "I see you." Those 3 words were worth more than a lifetime of forced approval. Of course, there were days the old pain came back. Holidays were the worst. I would see families laughing in cafes or carrying gifts through the snow, and something inside me would ache. I missed the idea of a family, the love I had never really known. But each time that ache came, I reminded myself, I did not lose them. They lost me. And in that truth I found strength. The day I realized I was free wasn't marked by fireworks or applause. It was quiet, simple. I was walking home from a long shift, the city buzzing around me, when I caught my reflection in a shop window. For the first time, I didn't see the frightened girl begging for approval. I saw a woman, tired, scarred, but alive. And I smiled. That smile wasn't for them. It wasn't to prove I had succeeded or to beg for recognition. It was for me. For the battles I fought alone, for the nights I thought I wouldn't make it, for the courage it took to walk away from the people who should have loved me most. I used to believe my worth depended on their acceptance. Now I know the truth. My worth was never theirs to give or take. I am not their puppet. I am not their shame. I am my own. And that is enough.